Good time of day to all of you, my friends here on the Internet Chess Club. This is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky, and I welcome you to my first show, Game of the Day from Norway 2017, the biggest event of the year. Okay, well, probably first I need to show you cross table after 2 rounds of play. And here we have it. 2 rounds, 10 games, and 2 decisive results. Okay, that's not what we hoped for, right? We hoped for a faster start, more exciting start, more blood, all being spilled. No, in some ways... Okay, well, chess is not bullfighting, right? Yet, I guess we get more and more impatient. Hard to blame the players, and it goes across the board. I mean, I remember earlier this year, well, the 2 big events of the calendar. First 2 tournaments from FIDE Grand Prix series. First in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates, and then in Moscow. And, well, that's where we basically sat through looking at Echo. That's interesting. Why would there be Echo? This thing is muted. I cannot hear myself. Okay. Alright, I'll continue. Hopefully it'll go away. Please make sure you tell me if you're having any problems with the audio. And of course, welcome you all. Familiar names. Okay, I'll keep on talking. Well, okay, that's the man that counts, says I don't hear any echo. Alright, well, as much as I want to please you, first I have to please my boss. So therefore, if the boss is happy, then the rest of you, will survive. Alrighty. So anyway, it's too early to know how to talk about this tournament, obviously, only 2 rounds in. What we have is what almost was the top 10 players in the world. Well, we had some changes lately, long after the lineup of this tournament had been announced. So 2 players, I believe that's Sergei Karakin and Anish Giri, got pushed out of top 10 by the 2 Sergeant players, Shahryar Mamediyarov and Ding Liren. Well, once again we hear, oh, if only Shak was there, if Ding was there. Well, yeah, but I don't know, really. Organizers, they try to plan ahead of the time, and it seemed like the best lineup they could hope for, and indeed, I believe they got the highest rating ever of any chess tournament, reaching the average of 27.93. And here we're supposed to say, oh, well, this one is for the ages. I personally don't care if it's 27.93 or 26.93. I want to see interesting games. And so far, even if I include the 2 decisive games, I assume that somebody covered already a game from round 1, Nakamura's win over Giri. I saw that game. And today's win, Kramnik over Anand, we'll just go, we'll do this. But even if I count as 2 games, I wouldn't say that they were very exciting. Was there 1 tactical shot landed in this tournament out of 10 games? With the 20% decisive results? I don't recall any tactics. No, well, we can say those players are very well prepared theoretically, of course, they're the best players. And they also very much alert, and they make sure that the opponent doesn't get what he wants. Now, some players call it, some fans, call it playing for two results. Alright, so the two results are the two positive results. I always remember this famous quote from two-time Soviet champion Lev Psakis. For many years, of course, he lives in Israel. Lev once said, "In chess there are three possible results, and two of them happen to be positive." No, Lev was a master of a cynical phrase, he was always good for a quip like this, but I mean, there's so much truth in it. So much. I mean, I understand. Well, there is money to be made and a position to be upheld in the world rankings, and of course that every rating point counts. Well, now we have what? We have... even Magnus is not that far ahead of the pack, there's probably some 20-something point margin, I'm not even sure. Wesley is second, and then the jockeying is going on for third and fourth place between Caruana and Kramnik. And that's important because we're talking about two players who will be seeded into the candidates. Obviously, Magnus is not going to be there. So it's Wesley, I assume, and either Kramnik or Caruana. I will remind you also that it's not current rating that's going to be taken. That's the average of all 12 ratings published in the year 2017. So we may not know this for sure until they play the last tournament this year. But we can assume that they're leading. But I understand there are a lot of considerations. There are a lot of... And people also... Okay, well, they may not be feeling well, they may be whatever, they may have family circumstances, whatnot. But ultimately, the bottom line is, why should I care? I go there, I want to see interesting games. Yeah, I admire the technique, I admire the opening preparation, but, I mean, I'm trying to, even from my point of view, well, I'm a grandmaster, I've seen it all, almost all. And I can appreciate some subtle things, but there isn't much of subtlety in this, because I can see that players, they aim to play for two results. Now, what comes out of this? No, usually it's one result. We call it a draw. Okay. In this situation, obviously, having white pieces helps. And indeed, so far looking at the tournament, there are some games where white didn't get anything. From today's round, I would say it was Wesley So versus MVL. There was really nothing there. There was a Greenfield, and white very quickly traded queens. That's another thing. The queens, they disappear pretty quickly from the board. And then he was down a pawn, but he had obvious compensation with the bishop pair, and the result was never in doubt. It was a draw. Another game that I'll probably leave unmentioned. No, I'll mention it now, but I won't bother covering it. Is the game between Caruana and Carlsen. Historically, Caruana, when Magnus was king, no, he's still king, but okay, but Magnus was way ahead of everyone. Caruana was near the only guy who would always give him a tough game. I remember, I know Magnus was winning most of them, but Caruana nicked him like, I know, at least 4 times. And I'm totally excluding rapid and blitz games. Well, first of all, Fabiano is not that good in rapid and is simply horrible in blitz. But when it was full-time control, he often beat Magnus. He would lose sometimes, but... So, well, we had hopes for this game, and the game was a total dud. Well... Yeah, well, we're gonna talk about it. I will start showing the game. It's right there. I just want to finish with the games that I'm not gonna put up on the screen even. So anyway, the game was a total dud, So the usual E45, the usual, anti-Berlin or Gioco Piano, it's the same structure. You'll actually see it in the game I'm about to show. And, I mean, Magnus, he had he had the same thing with the white pieces against Wesley, so in round 1, and he managed to squeeze a 1-pawn advantage out of this, and was never really close to a win. And they drew in the knight endgame ultimately. Yeah, and then the same thing, but Caruana had absolutely nothing. Well, I had a feeling that somewhere around move 18, Fabiano was already looking to bail out, which he did. No, right, one bad game. Obviously, Fabiano is not gonna quit. Well, he's gonna try, but arguably Magnus already met with two of his closest competitors, Wesley So and Fabiano Caruana. Even if Magnus is yet to light the scoreboard, he probably considers his tournament position quite okay. Alright, the highlight of today, the game of the day, is the game between Vishy Anand and Vladimir Kramnik. These people played each other about 1 million times, including a World Championship match, which Anand won. Just took the title from Kramnik. Well, they played many times together in the Kasparov era. Well, when pretty much every tournament and every series of events had to have a stamp of approval from Giri himself. So he knew the organizer, he was the one, discussing everything. And others, well, they were offered spots over there, well, by virtue of being best players. But it was like take it or leave it. No, they took it. And Anand, probably due to his general kind of laid-back attitude, Vishy is not the kind of guy to get into confrontations, and he'll basically play along. Well, sometimes he puts his foot down. I will remind you that after Shirov beat Kramnik in that match in Kosorova, so it was 99, right? And then a couple of months later, Kasparov said, well, there is no interest, in this match with Shirov. I'm like 18-0 against him, draws not counting, I don't remember exactly. So nobody is interested in that. Okay, fine. Well, interestingly enough, not too many people know that, or maybe forget, that Vishy Anand was offered a chance to play. And Vishy said, no. Well, he didn't say, no, I'm not gonna play you, Gary, or I'm not playing you because I think Shirov should play. Vishy found a way to get out of the spot, by saying, well, but I want to see bank guarantees that the prize fund is there. And okay, it was not happening. So, and then the next person down the list was Kramnik. Now, Kramnik played along with this because Kramnik knew he was younger than Kasparov, and he knew that he always matched up well against Gary, and finally came that match in London, well, many years ago, the year 2000, where Kramnik won and became new world champion. It wasn't really the end of Kasparov's era, right? Kasparov remained the strongest tournament player all the way through his last tournament in Linares 2005, which he shared first place with Topalov only after losing the last round game. And then he retired. Now, so Anand and Kramnik, they know each other very well. And while they were, at those days, they were second fiddles in that great chess orchestra. No, since Kasparov retired, they figured we will sort it out between themselves. And they did. Well, in favor of Anand in the World Championship match. But overall record between these two guys is probably about even. So they meet again, but where are they? Well, Kramnik is 6 years younger. Number 2, Anand already knows what it's like to play Magnus Carlsen in a match. He did it twice. He did certainly better in the second match. He put up more fight, and I don't think he should be ashamed of anything. Yeah, he lost to a stronger and younger player. Fine. The Kramnik's situation is different. He's yet to play Magnus in a match. And knowing Kramnik, as little as I know him now, but I used to know him pretty well, Kramnik really believes in his heart of hearts that if he gets to that World Championship match, he would have a chance against Magnus Carlsen. Now, there is only one way to find out. But before, Vladimir has to win the candidates tournament. Last tournament he didn't get a spot. He doesn't want to play in this Grand Prix series, and I understand there's too many tournaments, and he's a family man and it's a little older. So he tried to get there by rating, couldn't. Hoped for a wild card spot, it went to Levon Aronian. What can you do? But now he is in the position to grab the rating spot. So I think Kramnik has more motivation than Anand. For these two reasons. Age difference, one, and World Championship aspirations, two. Well, yet, of course, it's always a solid opening play. Interestingly enough, no knight f6. No Berlin. Okay. Knight f6 now. And then bishop c5. Interesting move in this move order. You know what? Most of the time, guys like Svidler and Shirov and others, when they play this variation, they first include b5, and then they go bishop c5. Well, that brings some implications here on the table, because white can actually play e4. Right now, instead of doing c3, which is the usual move, c3 is answered by d6. Then you do a4, and that's bishop g4. Has been played many times. Yeah, you can do your d4. You could have done it here, for example. Bishop g4 comes nonetheless. So black is able to get the bishop out. They don't want to put the bishop on b7. That would be the old Arkhangelsk variation. Now the bishop is active on g4. Pressure against d4, right? The rook, in the meantime, is protected by the black queen. So the rook didn't have to lose the tempo and leave the a file at the same time. Okay, but white a long time ago figured that they should play a4 right away, and this is by far the main move. And then black plays rook b8. And later, when the bishop is pushed back to b6, then this pawn gets under attack again from the white knight. That brings about that sacrificial line where black gives up the pawn on b5. It's been played many times. Black in turn gets to play his bishop to g4. They often mess up white's pawn structure on the king side, and it becomes a game. Anand knows it very well. He had battles with Peter Svidler in this. I'm sure Anand wouldn't mind to go into this position again, just because he has a lot of experience. I would say that current evaluation of opening theory is that white stands better. There was one of the games from the World Championship match, maybe the only game where Karakin had advantage with the white pieces. And he almost won that game against Magnus. And that would have been probably the end of Magnus' match and Magnus' World Championship reign, because Karakin was already up one game. Magnus survived that, and then he got that game back later in the match. Well, bishop c5. It's not a novelty. This has been played by many. I would mention the popular American Grandmaster Alexander Anisyuk, who played it even before he moved to the United States. I will also mention that Kramnik saw this position from the other side, from white, when he played Peter Leko in their World Championship match in Brissago, Switzerland, I believe in the year 2004. So, b5 is put on hold. Fair enough. And white can play c3. And then black goes b5. So if the white bishop goes to b3, then it's kind of mission accomplished already for black, because he avoided the dangerous line with early a4. Once again, he plays d6 and moves the bishop out. And he's good. Well, problem is, however, that white can pull the bishop all the way back to c2. The purpose of this, of course, is to protect the pawn on e4. And that allows white to not to worry about this pawn and gain some time, and after he plays d4 to do what he needs to be doing. Therefore, Anishuk and Leko and all other experts in this line, they played a very sharp move d5 in this position, which is not working very well after bishop b3, of course, because of the pressure. But here it's sort of possible. And there are a lot of variations that are stemming out of d4. I mean, here white can take on c5, can take on e5 in two different ways. And it can also play a ridiculous looking move knight d2. All of them are theoretically known, and all of them kind of give white some hopes for an advantage, but black, if he knows everything very well, he probably equalizes. Now, Kramnik, who had this with white, probably had more knowledge of this whole thing than we should. Now, what do you do in this situation? So you got a little surprised by the opponent's opening choice. It happens time and again to every chess player. Well, yeah, you can't help but being a little nervous, and you think, oh well, am I walking into something? But maybe I am. But all the same, you have to believe in what you played before and what you normally play. Oh yeah. Oh. Facing opponent's theoretical preparation has been part and parcel of this whole thing, for a very long time. Backing out of this, alright, maybe you can do this with white. With black it's much more difficult to do. That's the reason why most of top players, they probably spend 80% of their work on openings with black pieces. Because there you cannot find alternative ways. You have to walk one narrow path, even if it exists. Maybe there's just too little time and energy left to study for white. It's seemingly illogical, right? You think, if you give yourself more chances to win with white, then it's the same kind of half-point difference, right? But somehow, well, when you look at the tournament table, and then you see a guy scoring 1 point after 2 rounds, it could be 1 win, 1 loss, or 2 draws. And most players would prefer 2 draws. Losing hurts. Losing hurts more than winning pleases. For most people, for absolute majority of chess players. There have always been exceptions. Now, they're not among the players in this list. As great players as they are, no. They now become hard to find. Alright, so we should place the move knight c3. I mean, what we have here, we have the 4 knights opening, just 4 knights opening. This, what can white possibly have? No. Castles. I need to check my analysis there. And now the move knight d5. It's not a novelty, it had been played before. Maybe that kind of justifies Anand's opening choice. He probably looked at this, I don't know if immediately prior to the game or maybe earlier, as part of his preparation for somebody else. The move looks very logical, of course. The question is, what about the e4 pawn? No, if white doesn't want to deal with that, he plays d3. But then obviously the answer is h6, because with the active bishop on c5, you don't want to deal with that pin. Okay, and then knight d5, and then you play d6. There is no bishop g5. Yeah, I'm quoting some game. The usual stuff, bishop e3. There was a game between Dominguez and Ding Liren. In that game, black changed the pawn structure by moving the white pawns to the left toward the center. Put his knight on g6 and played for f5. Now, I guess for Ding it was sort of a natural decision to make, because he's a career King's Indian player, and no, he knows the value of playing f5 and beginning his attack against the white king, and he is not particularly intimidated by having this overextended pawn that may come under attack. But Anand played knight d5, and now I gotta absolutely give a lot of credit to Kramnik. There are probably some moves other than knight takes e4. But he took on e4. Now, you can say it was all prep. No, how could he guess that Anand would play knight c3 and then knight d5? No, maybe even if he looked at that, well, it probably was just a passing kind of thought. So, nonetheless, it's a brave move, and if it works, no, great, but you allow bishop g5. Technically speaking, bishop g5 is a novelty. There was a game of relatively unknown players where white played this kind of stuff. I personally don't quite get it. What is white playing for? To win this pawn back? I'm not even sure he can. This doesn't do anything. I think black's better here, or maybe, I don't know, maybe winning. No, okay. Clearly Anand didn't have this in mind. But then again, Kramnik. So Kramnik sees this game. What are the names of players? It has to be a typo, if the guy with the white pieces rated 559, probably 1559. Game played by email. The black pieces guy was 1727. I'm taking it from ChessBase. No, right, seriously, you Kramnik, right? And somebody tells you, or something tells you, oh, what about at knight d5? You do tap, 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 tap on your keyboard. Oh, there was a game. Tassinati Matugin, black won. I'm good. Yeah, right. Nobody does it like that. You gotta check what you play. You can't rely on the outcome of one random game. Yeah, the position looks great, of course, but knight takes f6. Ridiculous. Of course, it didn't play. It goes bishop g5. Now, the bishop has to come back to e7. Now it's a different story. First of all, white gets the bishop pair. And secondly, he's got pressure with the rook against the black queen. White will probably get his pawn back. And now Kramnik plays h6, develops. White gets this. It's a pretty strong pressure against e5. I don't know if d6 was a good move here, if it was possible, but no, black remains somewhat uncomfortable because the queen probably has to protect the knight on f6 because you don't want to take with the pawn. And all the same, the queen is opposed by the white rook. From that point of view, e4 is more logical, of course, and now white is just trying to win the pawn on e4. back. But then comes this. Bishop there. Time to break the pin. And now, knight c4. Now, knight c4 is a... It's actually quite a remarkable move. What about d5? Why wasn't d5 played? I mean, white has compensation. There are no two ways about it. He has an opposed bishop on the dark squares here. The black king is somewhat weakened, you know. Perhaps white could think of h4. He can also think of this breakthrough. But he has to be a little careful with that, because the pawn can go forward. Although both sides have to be careful here. Now white's aiming to surround this pawn somehow. The bishop on b7 obviously totally out of play. Now Kramnik here makes a different decision, a decision that I like a lot. So he thinks in terms of not leaving himself with bad pieces, like that knight on a5. Conceivably white can go b3 and totally restrict that knight, even preparing c4 later on. So while he has a chance, he played knight c4. Capture. Undermining. Blockade. All by the book. Alright, so up to this point, 20 moves into the game. Well, it's maybe even more than we expected. Sharp and balanced position. White has the bishop pair. Black has an extra pawn. The king is little loose. Black is trying to hold on to his blockade. Now, about as exciting outcome of an opening as we can see. Obviously, all other games in today's round, they were nowhere near this level of complexity and excitement. Complexity for the players involved and excitement for the rest of us. Well, but I mean, when you gambit a pawn, no, you expect to play down a pawn, and your compensation is not going to be very obvious, and the ways of improving your position are not going to be easily defined simply because your investment was so small. Most of the time, when you give up a queen, you know, you have a checkmate in 3 in mind. In this situation, white cannot expect immediate dividend. But no, he has to be patient and he has to keep on introducing new factors in the position. I mean, I cannot imagine Anand of 20 years ago would play what he played now. He played bishop e5. All he wants now is to get his pawn back and accept a simple position which probably he thought would be equal, but it turned out anything but. I don't know if Kramnik is the best, you know. Well, Magnus Carlsen probably has his own thoughts about this. But indeed, in this game, no, I cannot find a fault in Kramnik's play until much later in the game. We'll get there. So this bishop e5. Now, bishop e5 is a bailout move. So white only has one idea. Take on f6, take on c4, and win this pawn back. That's exactly what happened. Now, he cannot count on any advantage after that, because the number of pieces left on the board is going to be so limited that white is absolutely has no chance of organizing any kind of attack against the black king. Other factors will become more important, namely, who's gonna win the e-file. Alright, we'll see, of course, we'll continue. But I said 20 years ago, there is no way that Anand would even consider playing this. He would go h4. Yeah. Is there any obvious way for black to simplify, to resolve this situation? No. White's gonna keep his pressure no matter what. Now he adds another factor in the position, that loose pawn over there on g5 that's gonna be attacked with queen d2. I mean, this would logically stem out of White's opening play. Was c5 playable instead of knight c4? c5 is quite radical. No, you're not attacking the pawn on d4 yet, so now the big question is if White can win the pawn on e4. You know what I'm thinking? Maybe I should take. I mean, queen takes c5 allows b4, right? And now I have bishop d6. Dimitrios, maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know if you expected White to take. I mean, White needs to open it up a little bit. Right, the dark squares. If I take on c7, for example, if I take on c7 now, that bishop is gonna be totally stranded on a5. I assume d6, bishop stays there. No, it's a very strange position for the bishop. That's material quality now, but I think black has a fair chance. If he gets to line up his pawns and somehow get the f pawn going, he may actually have a pretty strong attack brewing there if the pawn gets to f4. The question is how to step back with the knight and play f5 without allowing something. But in the meantime, what is White doing? Bishop comes to b4. Probably the good move to start is this. Queen e6. I want my queen in light square. I'm actually entertaining some ideas. e3. Okay, suppose you do this. e3 takes. Double trouble. g2 and a5. Well, I never thought, that White should take this pawn on c7. When you play a gambit, you should banish all those treacherous thoughts, from your mind. I gotta get my pawn back. I'm down a pawn. No, don't play gambit lines then. Or rather, play them. Who is my favorite player to watch? Well, they're not in this tournament. I don't have a favorite player in this tournament. Some things they do I admire. Positional play of Vladimir Kramnik. The tenacious defense of Sergei Karakin. The incredible endgame persistence and technique from Magnus Carlsen. And I mean, Hikaru Nakamura in his tactical defense and all that. They're great players, but they're just not my favorite guys. I know I just made myself 10 enemies, but no, the list grows daily. But I mean, I know Boris Gelfand answered that. There was this criticism that how he mapped out his strategy in a world championship match years ago against Vishy Anand. He said, we are here not to entertain the public. We're here to win the match. Now, at least Boris was quite open and honest about this. Well, but nonetheless, I would be lying to you if I said, oh, man, I just love Anish Giri. No, I don't. I don't love his chess. His chess doesn't make me excited. I mean, I appreciate what he can do, and I'll show you his effort today, but 12 rounds against Trump. Oh, goodness me. Well, it wasn't in referral to any of the three people you mentioned, neither Putin, Trump, or Hillary, but there was a script from somebody. Okay. dealing with this guy is like playing chess with a pigeon. Well, the pigeon struts around and knocks all the pieces down and then takes a dump in the middle of the board. I think chess can easily do without the pigeons and also the people you mentioned. Okay. So I don't like bishop e5. No, you start something, I mean, if you can't finish it, I don't even know what Vishy missed, right? So he chooses, nobody, put the gun to his head and said, you must play knight d5 now. Well, the moves after that are quite obvious, and I think the moves were expected, that everything that Kramnik did. So they play this, and 10 moves later, the show is over, and Vishy is just trying to get his pawn back and go home. Okay, let's see what came out of this. Oh, on the face of it, it looks, well, easy peasy, we're gonna agree to a draw now. And Kramnik says, well, maybe not quite. And we begin to think here. Well, black has the E file, right? Before we notice the B file, we should probably agree that the E file is more important than the B file. It's closer to the kings. Well, since the bishops are more likely than not going to be traded, the resulting piece configuration, queen and rook for each side, is heavily tactical. And, of course, I cannot say that either Anand or Kramnik don't know how to play such positions, but some of the great players of the past, had a hard time. I heard an opinion somewhere that, maybe the sole reason Alekhine was able to defeat Capablanca in the 1927 World Championship match in Buenos Aires is because he played such positions, queen and rook each, better than Capablanca did. You say, oh, it's so minor. No, minor or not, it happened 7 times in their 34-game match. And those games, and Alekhine, I believe, won 3 of them. Capablanca won 1. Maybe, almost every critical game in that match ended up in this piece configuration. Well, it's not the middle game, not the end game. It's some kind of a creature in between. Well, yeah, Giri showed great promise, but come to think of that, almost every and each of these guys, let's look at the list of 10 players. Exclude Kramnik and Anand. These guys are they're veterans, they've been around the block time or two. Let's talk about the closest pursuit, kind of guys for Magnus Carlsen. Okay, so there will be like 7 players. All of them had their time at number 2. You say, oh, Levon Aronian, number 2. We call him number 2. Aronian had like second best rating for a couple of years probably. Coming to candidates tournaments as a favorite, rating favorite to win them, and then crushing and burning out of 3 of them. 4. Okay, in the 4th one he wasn't favorite already. But a couple of times he was one of the favorites. Alright, so his highest rating, if I'm not mistaken, was 2835. Now, if he had 2835, he would say, Levon number 1, because I believe that Carlsen is 2832. Now, others. Okay, Wesley is still number 2, he's there. MVL had a great run, crossed over into 2800. That was about a year ago. He was the hottest player over there, and then we waited with bated breath, that MVL would just destroy, Sinkfield tournament and all others, and then he would he started averaging like 1 win per tournament. Others, no, Fabiano, we remember his 7-0 run. We remember his rating of what, 27.51. At that time, Magnus was at, 28.51. Magnus was still about 20 points ahead, but he was bridging the gap, then fell off the cliff. Nakamura was over 2800, all of them. So was Anish. Anish was the youngest guy, and he's doing the old Peter Leko thing, first I lose. First I learned not to lose to these guys, and then, unfortunately, the second part doesn't come as scheduled. It never came for Peter Leko, and I wouldn't be betting any money that would ever come for Anish Giri. Another thing about Giri that bothers me, he's not exactly like a slow on the uptake or anything. Why is he playing Blitz so poorly? Why? Being the youngest guy, he shouldn't be finishing dead last in this tournament, even behind like Anand and Caruana, who's notoriously bad Blitz player. At least Fabiano is very open about this, and he said, well, I just don't play Blitz well. What's up with that? Is that a confidence crisis? That downed, many promising young talent. The kid is like soaring on his wings, when he's young and he doesn't know any better. And then gets hit a couple of times. Gathers himself, gets up, well, whatever. But the flight is not the same anymore. Why do you think people were saying if Kasparov was finished in that first match in 1984 by Karpov, and it had the looks that it was going to be like this? I'm not even talking, the 5-0 score. That was already after 30-something games, 31 games. After 9 games, Karpov had a 4-0 lead, in the match to 6 wins. And people are saying, well, if Karpov just finished him, Karpov made the biggest strategic error of his life, trying to do what Fischer did. First of all, you don't do what Fischer did no matter what, because he already made some draws. Fischer didn't. No. So he let Kasparov hang in there and all that. But they said if he finished Kasparov in 15 games or whatever, in that match, even with the score like 6-2, it would be very difficult for Kasparov to come back. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Well, some people did come back, like Spassky did after losing to Petrosian, but not everybody. You lose your momentum, and then that's what happens to many of these guys. They had the momentum, and they got to number 2. And then what? They stayed there, some longer, some shorter. And now they're back in the pack. To the game. More active queen, and the rook on open file. And now Vicious has to do something that he really doesn't like to do. He has to defend the worst position. Now, Vicious was a great defender when he was young. He had the uncanny ability to play faster as his position was getting worse. Intimidated a lot of people. I remember my good old friend Alexander Khalifman, he could never solve Vichy. He got eliminated twice from those knockout championships by Vichy in both matches. He simply had winning positions on the board, not even in the first game of this mini match. No, the game, if you bring it to conclusion, like 2 connected passed pawns in the rook endgame. If you just queen them, then that's it. You get by Anand. You eliminate him. You're through to next round. And he couldn't. Well, not only Vichy posed tactical problems on every move, he also did it with utmost, I wouldn't even call it confidence, almost like indifference to his position. That was just, you expect the guy to grab his head, oh boy, how I escape from this, I'm about to kicked out of the tournament. And Vichy just sits there. He has this slight smile on his face. Plays moves incredibly fast, and you can't help. You start wondering, maybe I'm not doing so well. Why is he so unperturbed? That was back then. Another great defender, the guy I played many times, Gatakamsky, went public and said, "Oh, well, stop calling me this great defender. You know, I don't like to defend anymore. Defense takes stamina." Well, so far, okay. No, Black cannot quite get win any material or any kind of decisive gains, but he keeps his pieces better positioned, and that makes that task difficult. So now maybe the rook comes to f6. That already forces white to keep the rook on f1. I'm always in fine form. Hey, you know, did I ever disappoint you? Well, problem is that white has no way to resolve this. Sometimes you sit in a worse position and think, okay, fine, you know, let me pitch a pawn, you know, the yada yada, rook endgame, you know, I think I know how to draw it, and you go for it. Or sometimes, well, let me just try to attack here, or maybe I'll scramble, you know, get some perpetual out of this. Here, there's just none of that is even possible. Yeah, you can move your queen back and forth, you know, but, well, the queen is alone. Well, the rook is passive on f1. So queen d5. Well, back. There comes possibly a critical moment of the game when Vishy took on c7. Now, this move, queen takes c7, I wonder, you know, like why he played it. No, because Black didn't have any plan necessarily, you know, that would work and increase his advantage. And now he gives Black, without activating his rook and without doing anything about the nice position of the Black rook, he gives White this. So he unbalances the pawn structure and gives the opponent a passed pawn. Maybe the logic behind this was that he kind of counted, oh, I'll get it more open in the middle so I can start giving checks to the Black king. Well, nonetheless, a4 probably was a better choice. So he's trying for counterattack, but counterattack is quite difficult here because Black is Black is on the d4 pawn as well. There are probably multiple ways here for White to shed a pawn and try to simplify, but well, the thing is, if Black stands up a pawn, now rook endgames, everything's gonna depend where the rooks are, right? Who puts the rook behind that passed pawn? Suppose we somehow trade this whole thing, you know, for d6, and trade queens in the process. Then White can only make a draw if he puts the rook on a7. If Black gets to put his rook on a6 behind the pawn, then forget about it, you lose. So therefore, this position, once again, does not offer any clear solution. Well, this king, you know, what's weakness of a king? And it's not just a shelter. Sometimes a shelter and then it says, oh, your king boxed in. You're like, I thought it was well sheltered. No, it's boxed in. What's the difference? It depends. Say, it depends. No, yeah, it depends. It depends on the pieces. The king's safety is rather an issue of activity of the pieces. As was proven many times in games of great attackers of the past, even the most perfect pawn shelter can be destroyed. The opponent brings enough firepower, you know, well, throws in, you know, a couple of pieces, pries the king open and then hunts it down. The king on g7, a good thing is it has sort of a more wiggle room to maybe step on a different square when white attempts a perpetual check. We'll come to this little later. Anyway, so there it goes. Queen b6, pawn goes forward. Now it's time for white to wake up to reality, because if the pawn comes to a2, then one way or another, black will find a way of winning. So f4 was played. Oh, it's probably not a very happy choice. But Kramnik's decision here is remarkable. He plays a great move, rook to e1. By doing this, he actually takes the sting out of this plan, which was to take on g5 and mate black on f7. Chorus. Chorus was former, kind of one of the in-between names that steel company in Holland had, with different mergers, whatnot, that the company that sponsors YKZ tournament. Now they call it Tata. Okay, that's from India. But it's basically same plant, same place. Nothing will ever change there. So now, why rook e1? Well, in queen endgames, what's one outstanding factor in the queen endgame? I'll help you with that. Far advanced passed pawn. Unlike rook endgames, where rook can get behind the passed pawn and the pawn cannot queen without help of the king or whatever, some tactical factors. With queens, it's automatic. You just shepherd the pawn forward. So there is no hope in defending a queen endgame the way we defend rook endgames. The only hope is to pry open the opponent's king position and dig out some perpetual check. But the pawn remains on f7. And the d6 pawn is some kind of obstacle. White just cannot find a pattern of perpetual check. And other than that, okay, what else to do? You can try to run your pawn forward and see if you can get, you can stay in the race, but you really can't, right? So he took. And now a very remarkable move from Kramnik. He let that pawn be. How many of you would just let the pawn be like this, eh? Seriously. Free pawn with check. Yet he took on g5. Now, here is the thing. If white goes forward, he's hopelessly pinned. Cannot get a4, loses c5 as well. Well, if you think about this king, then when the black queen controls this diagonal, there's not going to be a whole lot of checks. Maybe no checks. Oops. That's a big oops, right? He's in a square and you're not. Well, a lot of queen endings are won because of this tactical possibility of trading to winning pawn endgame. That's why it's essential to open up the defender's king. Because with that you have more chances for checks and then interferences and ultimately blocking a check to your king with counter check. Bishop plays better move, king g1. He has to get his king out. Okay, up to this point, perfect game. Perfect game. 41 moves in. Now, I believe they don't have the increment from move 1. It only kicks in at move 61. And, but they reached the time control, so 1 hour given to players. Well, honestly, around this time, I had to leave. I couldn't watch it. I had things to do. And I just thought, I just gonna last a few moves. This is the line I saw. Now, possibilities here. Now, this was not... This was not so impressive. Queen d2. g5 protected, you must eliminate this. And then comes the oops. Yeah, I always have the oops part for you. Here is the oops part. Black queens, white doesn't. No, white's late. I guess Vish's plan was to get the king out safety, because you have to avoid those oops lines by just simply eliminating possible checks. King h2, however. Black would continue with queen b2. I remember I was driving to my appointment there and just running this position through my head. You see, I had to deal with traffic, and I had to, I don't know, listen to AC/DC while doing this, and Kramnik sat there, you know, in the absolute quiet of a tournament room with his cup of coffee or tea. And yeah, I was 100% sure that he would figure out everything I figured and more. Now, alright, this is what I call shepherding the pawn forward, right? So you're out of options, you do this. I thought king g6. It all looks so hopeless, to be honest. Now, white has totally opened up his king, and this is how this whole thing ends. Now black is gonna start taking pawns. First of all, don't go into the oops territory with this. So you have to sit back with the king. So you sit there, give me this with check. You're probably not coming to f1 to give me one more with check. It doesn't matter. Oh, by the way, I got another oops line. Finished. Well, it's after the time control. Well, you know, people are affected in a different way as they get a little older. They say that you start having more difficulties in maybe in openings you learned recently, or type of play that you try to acquire recently. Well, change your style and all that, but they say you go back to your core skills. Well, okay, core skills, you know, which in Kramnik's case is technique. Now, what's technique? No, that's a mental thing, of course, but also its ability to calculate variations. So mental discipline and ability to calculate. And in Kramnik's case, there is also great positional understanding of the endgame and the knowledge of typical positions. So everything comes together. So Kramnik used to be like a machine. You know, it's a compliment in chess, right? Yeah, he had terrible advantages over me, and yet he played this move queen takes c4. After spending some time, now, Vladimir, let me ask you this, right? I'll go back to this whole thing. So you had this position on the board, on move 40. You could have... Oops. Yeah, right here. You could have taken this pawn and then recapture. You have clear extra pawn, and by all rules it has to be winning. Yet you didn't do this. You played instead pawn takes because you wanted to push the pawn forward, which should take priority over capturing white's pawns. Why did you change your mind? Maybe he didn't feel comfortable playing king g6. I can only guess. I have no idea what's so uncomfortable about it. Can't really tell. Often this run with the king behind enemy pawns, and using them as shelter against perpetual check is it's kind of a standard way of winning queen endgames. Anyway, Kramnik begins to surprise me. Takes this pawn. This goes back. That. Okay, you can see that perpetual check mechanism already. No, queen d2, we knew that was the right answer. Now queen goes back. So here's the situation with that. Yeah, so the queen has to guard g5 because there is ready to make perpetual check, yet support the a-pawn. So Vladimir can do this. So he did this, making an important step forward. And now comes that. The second step, however, is much harder to make because he needs to keep g5 protected and push forward a2. Well, I think it can only be accomplished from d2 square, which currently is unavailable. So, like it or not, he had to move his king. In queen endgames like this, you usually, once you find a safe position for the king, you don't want to mess with that. You try to maneuver your queen and advance your pawns, and while just keeping the opponent away from perpetual check. When you have to get your king involved, that's where it gets dicey. f6. Oh well. I absolutely don't like this move. It should have gone king g6. I think that attack from behind... No, you can actually protect the pawn on f7. So you do this checks, right? d6. I don't even think it really matters. No, it doesn't matter. Now a2 is a nice step forward. g4 is not mate. The king will be running through and hide behind the d-pawn. This has to be a win. Maybe there is something else here. Maybe even better to play this move. Maybe I'm giving up this pawn unnecessary. Let's look at this. If this, then I go king f5. So I didn't even give this pawn. The king is running free. Well, black usually in such positions doesn't have to calculate to the end. You just... You calculate a little bit, but largely plays intuitive here. So, well, yeah, the king is out of shelter. That's the problem caused by the capture on c4. Kramnik could have avoided that. Now he has to... Yeah, king g6 and run up. Well, it didn't happen. I don't like f6. The pawn actually creates more perpetual check possibilities. And now Anand plays this. I mean, it's a strange looking move. When you play this, maybe you would like to do it this way, right? So I mean, if he goes with the queen now to support his a-pawn moving forward, then you have the check from e8. I'm not quite sure. Well, I'm no longer confident that the win is so easy. Okay, bishop plays queen a4. Now checks. It's already very murky. No, well, we know the same defense, right? Give this check and come back to a4. Stay put, prevent him from going a2, and aim at that check, which may lead to perpetual. Kramnik would be furious, you know, if he couldn't win this endgame. He didn't used to have endgame slips like this. We should play that, it's unfortunate. The difference will become well, there was this move queen c3 and then get the king through. Okay, well, that's the line he had to go for. At g4 is not mate, you can come up king f4. So this, and then you give up that pawn, and now probably the key is to get behind. Maybe the checks will run out. I don't know, will they run out? Yeah, that's unnerving, of course. No, they won't run out. As queen on a5 is not going to be able to help the king. Maybe there is no win anymore. Actually, I'll go out on a limb and I'll tell you that this probably a draw already. Once he moved the f pawn, f6 deserves a full-fledged question mark. The pawn had to absolutely stay on f7. So how did he win? What on earth, you know, made Anand change his defensive plan? You stay on a4, no, always stay there. Why did he play queen b7? I have no idea. Finally. It's an essential move. So now we have j8 covered. And the problem is that for white, is that when he does, suppose this, and that, takes this pawn and comes a2. And in this situation comes possibly queen c4. So you're thrown off the light squares. You need to give a perpetual check on the light squares only. You can't do this anymore. You're off, you're on a dark square. So you give check on the 7th and then actually, let me do it different way. I'll do this. Threatening to come to e1. Even if black lost his extra pawn, I think he's on the right track. Not something similar happened. I'm actually thinking maybe queen a7 is the most accurate move. Yeah, that's best. The queen will guard the 7th and there are no other ways of giving check. And the white queen cannot even get in front of the pawn. Alright, there were some errors in this endgame. Well, I don't want to criticize players for the way they handled the rest of the game. It was queen endgames are notoriously difficult. I will just point out that I'm surprised that after time control, Kramnik rejected the line that I was thinking as I was driving. Maybe he needed to listen to some AC/DC. Alright, so that's the highlight of the day. Now, briefly, Nakamura Aronian. One of these games with, one of these games where White kind of messed around a little bit in the opening and then found himself in a worse position. But the difference between Nakamura of today and Anand of today is, no, exactly that's what it is. It's 19 years of age. 19 years ago, Anand would have defended today's game. And Nakamura can still do this. Well, of course, it's an open question what would happen with Hikaru once he reaches Anand's age. But anyway, White stepped on totally wrong path here by capturing with the queen. I can't even understand, why anybody would play this move. I mean, if you're a d4 player, then you always want to take with the pawn, and then you're fighting for center. You're taking toward the center. One pawn you already traded. Now it's time to trade the other one. And you have your bishop pair. Now, of course, there are going to be some obstacles on your way, but b takes c3 absolutely has to be played by any d4 player. I just cannot understand queen takes c3. It's just... So when you get some kind of a exchange queen's gambit position, but... I mean, you're a little behind on development. That bishop is developed. And where is going to be your advantage? What are you even hoping for after queen takes c3? I don't get it. Pawn takes, of course. Well, if you say, why didn't he keep his bishop? Well, it's not so easy to do. You're behind in development, and some bad things may happen. Actually, yeah. Actually here, maybe I should play c5. Oh, maybe. I don't know. There's some dangers associated with all this. I'm not even sure this is so safe. No, maybe it is. No, maybe it is. Yes, I don't know. Well, he didn't want to risk such variations. Possibly knight d7 then c5, but anyway, bishop takes f6. Kind of an early bailout, but no, well, as it turned out that this position actually by small margin it favors black. There were two classical examples of this. There was this game Kasparov beat somebody. I think he beat Portish. And Kramnik also beat somebody. I need to look it up. Very simple structure, but now with less pieces on the board, White's pawn minority attack is not going to bring a whole lot of dividend. And any kind of action that Black does kind of symmetrically along this diagonal, it's going to be directed against the White king. Some minimal advantage. Well, now they say that players cannot offer a draw until move 60. It was funny in yesterday's first round. Magnus got exasperated trying to win with knight endgame, traded knights, went to pawn endgame with just up position, right? And they played a couple of moves and Black holds up position and 2 pawns against 1. Magnus says, okay, draw. Comes the arbiter, says, no, you have to play till move 60. I can imagine what Bobby Fischer would say to this arbiter. Once Fischer agreed to a draw, they have the 30-move rule, and some interzonal, I think it was. And the chief arbiter was this Romanian guy, Troianescu, and he was very polite, actually, came to Fischer and says, oh, Mr. Fischer, I apologize, but the rules and this and that. And Fischer just blew him off. He said, I know better than your FIDE and those people when it's a draw. If I say it's a draw, then it's a draw. And then he started talking like, I mean, this guy is a communist and usual Bobby stuff. I mean, that's when chess players were real people. And now Magnus Carlsen, world champion, the guy who basically has a chess world in his back pocket, you know, like a Norwegian schoolboy, has to play 3 more moves, shuffling his king left and right, and together with the opponent, and repeating the same opposition 3 times, not to get reprimanded for his early draw offer. Come on, Magnus, you know, just overturn the table, you know, like throw all the pieces there, curse the arbiter next time, curse the TV camera, you know, and storm off. You know, they cannot insult your intelligence like this. Yeah. But here, I don't know. No, well, maybe Hikaru wished he could offer a draw, but can't. The problem is that as the game goes on and on, you know, it's gonna be black who's improving. Yeah, you can't even get your pawn minority attack going, right? Tons of moves, and now... Well, black plays this little annoying thing, you know, threatening to play knight f4. Yeah. Well, Hikaru is a tough defender. He never loses his cool, right? So he just brought his knight to protect his weak pawn. And now he removes the rook from the e-file, and then there's no longer pin. Nonetheless, you know, like this similar action, right? Similar pawn minority attacks, but action that happens near the king, well, is more important. No, well, I don't know. I never met Bobby. I don't know if it was pathetic, but certain things, no, well, I understand. I mean, bumming around, you know, the way Fischer did, you know, never been able, you know, to, you know, well, settle down, have his own household and all that, you know, it obviously doesn't speak very well of Bobby Fischer. But, no, at least, you know, he had his way of standing up for what he believed in. You know, that's what I meant to say. I mean, I'm not defending his lifestyle and whatever. I also find it kind of pathetic. I agree with you. But all the same, you know, this kind of a corporate obedience, you know, demonstrated by Magnus Carlsen in this situation, I think it doesn't serve well chess, the image of chess. Well, has to be some kind of balance, you know, found between, no, you have to have a little bit of bad boy, you know, in this. When everybody plays by the rules and everybody's very nice and kisses, you know, all the organizer's hand, you know, like this all the time, if not hand only, you know, then it just becomes boring. Where is the action? Chess is not really exciting on the chess part, right? The score line, I mean, I look at this box score and I see 2 wins after 2 rounds, you know, like, and nobody did anything outrageous, you know, off the board, you know. Where's the fun following this thing? Yeah, Magnus is prone to get angry, you know, but he somehow chose, in my opinion, the wrong moment to be nice. Now, maybe I'm not being serious about this. Well, who knows? So anyway, now this situation is critical, but look at this simplification. Not too many people would do this. You give up a pawn. It was before time control. Hikaru didn't have a whole lot of time. But that's such a key move. You have to see it. Because now, well, the knight on h5 is loose. I mean, black had such high hopes. Play stuff like knight g3. Would win the game on the spot, right? But queen c5 just saves at the last moment. So anyway, now this is good. This is big part of it. I'm not calling for these guys, you know, to whatever, fold like a lawn chair, you know, just to provide us with more decisive results. Obviously, it's not right, and I applaud this defensive effort, which, by the way, was not the end of it. He still had to defend the endgame. But look at the very resolute g3. You just break it up and... No, well, black's advantage was rather symbolic here. Now, you can blunder, but I don't think there is a realistic way of winning. I will skip all the computer suggestions here because they just don't make any sense. Now, great defensive effort by Hikaru. Levon, on the other hand, he shouldn't be very upset. He gave it all, what he could find in the position, and good game. And the last one to show today was longish 76 move long effort by Anish Giri, only to be thwarted by Sergei Karakin's trademark tough defense. Now, yeah, I mean, it wasn't by accident, that Karakin did something, well, that, no, in that department, in that area of the game, and that work was, probably it was done for a long time. It started bearing fruit, I would say probably in late 2015. And then he became indeed this real tough customer. Ask Magnus how easy was that match. And one thing is that Karakin's openings with black, he has this tendency of playing passively. And he gets in worse positions. So he gets a lot of practice to defend. Now in this, I think he was surprised by this move bishop d3. Everybody plays a3 in this position. They just don't want to check. But knight d2, people used to move the king and then try to use the loose position of the bishop and maybe even do some kind of stuff like h4, try to do that Greek gift thing. No, it wasn't quite working out. But knight d2, so white's kind of going the wrong way with the knight, but he also steps away from the spin. Now, if you wonder about losing control over the d4 square, in this particular line of bishop f4, white almost always pushes the pawn forward, gives black that passer, but it's nicely blockaded. And, no, well, the knight will later come to c4. So it's interesting. Well, Karakin decided not to push the pawn forward, and then they kind of circled around. I don't know who gained time, who lost time. You say take here. Well, I don't know. Bishop h7. You probably don't wanna lose a pawn that is next to your king for the pawn that's away from kings. Probably not. So interesting play by Giri. And no, he was able to stabilize the situation with a typical small advantage. I'll take you to a critical moment because obviously, as usual, we are running long. And I don't really have much to say. I already expressed my lack of excitement over this type of stuff. I know, well, I played myself many games like this, but no, right. First of all, I wasn't getting paid, to produce beautiful chess. It's not like I'm saying I'm not getting paid to produce beautiful chess, as Gelfand said. I'm getting paid to win world championship, which also he has a point. But in my case, I had that point and much, much stronger. Well, then when you basically pay your own freight to chess tournaments, well, you have very short temper when it comes to any random person telling you, wow, you're not playing exciting chess, why are you even here? Well, I tell you why I'm here, friend. Oh, because I just drove 500 miles and I'm paying for my hotel and meals here. Well, that's why I'm here. And who's asking? Okay, but that's a different story, of course. Well, the point is that Anish played it well, so he brought the bishop around. So now, but the question is that occupation of the d4 square, right? In itself, alone, it's just gonna simplify. So he had to find a plan, and he actually found an interesting plan. So he triples, which is good. So gets queens off. And now instead of a standard move knight d4, Anish opens up on the queen side. And he doesn't want symmetry on the queen side. He actually wants the pawns on adjacent files. Like his pawn is fine on a3, he wants to hit the b pawn. And there it comes, critical moment of the game. So Karakin, no, it's sort of a typical game for Sergei. But he's still not yet in a situation with his back against the wall. It's coming. And he did it to himself. He played a move I frankly cannot understand. The pawn is going to be probably weaker on b6 than it was on b7. Now the bishop becomes kind of bad and the knight loses support. What's b6? Huh? Well, Kramnik's the greatest player ever. No, I guess you certainly can consider him in this list. Contributions, no, all across the board, well, obviously, and from opening to middle game, the end game. I was always particularly impressed with Kramnik's endgame technique. Unfortunately, it kind of started slipping away with age. Even today, it wasn't the most convincing performance. Well, now, erosion of core skills, as I mentioned, this is the thing that makes you question, why you even bother playing anymore. Kramnik, apparently, he's not bothered by this question. No, good for him. He's in a leading position. We'll see. Instead of this move b6, which I totally hate, b4. Well, if this, then I don't have any problems there. So let's get to c4 with the knight. The b pawn's now on the same file. Where is white's attack against the b pawn? And I can trade knights, or maybe I can come to c4. No, simplification continues. Now I assume that bishop takes b4 would have been played, and now I was thinking this. Pin. Oh, the Berlin. Oh, yeah, we're entirely grateful for this. Like, I don't know, there are some... Okay, there are some things, that probably weren't good for you, I assume. They used to tell us that diet cola, well, it's good for you, because you don't get that sugar, which is bad for you. And they also say that all those fat-free things. Who invented this blue milk? Well, 0% or whatever. Not 0, probably 1%. I see it sometimes. Every once in a while, I even see people drinking it. 1% milk? Okay, maybe it's good for you, but do we need to worship the inventor of this thing? Is that like the most exciting thing that you can have? May I have a glass of nice 1% milk? Oh boy. Castor oil, yeah, another good thing. No, of course, I'm not questioning Vladimir's chess. It's just... So anyway, in this position, I thought Black would make a draw in this endgame. I mean, he has all this blockade in the making, right, with the king and the ruined pawns on the king's side. But somehow Sergei, I noticed that's his problem. He doesn't go for solutions like this until he's totally desperate and he knows that he cannot hold it by simple means. And that allows the opponent to push it a little further. I would have never done this. Look at this terrible bishop against the knight on d4. And now even f6. That was not nice. I hate what he did. It's sort of a simplification pawn-wise, but no. And now Giri is like happy camper, That's what he lives for. I'm playing for 2 results. There is no way white can lose this. Okay, I'll come to only one moment. I cannot go through 74 moves. So, once again, after time control, nice maneuver, knight to f4, and no, white's trying to win something. And now comes critical moment. Giri strikes with g5. I like this move, because even if he trades pawns, he's trying to get to g6 and open up the black king. That could be very important, because, no, the tactical possibilities for knight, some forks here and there. I would say on this, maybe he was looking to play knight e6, then grab the pawn with check, then hit g6, maybe rook g1. You like play for mate. Well, one thing white never wants to do is to trade a pair of rooks. At least that's what Giri thought. You know what, somehow I... Maybe it's the same thing, right? Somehow I thought, I like this capture. I thought if he takes with the bishop, I would do this. No, rook endgame should probably offer some chances. I don't know, I'm not sure, really. Maybe just because I play rook endgames better than other endgames, and I would naturally seek it. Doesn't seem like a clear draw to me. You can do things. You have the e-pawn advancing, you have this followed by check. You can force his king little out of action. I don't know. I just thought. He did this. Now the problem is that if you win one pawn, well, that's where it went kinda wrong. On this move, there is this one, and then you have to trade knight c3, then you can't win. It's okay to try to win 2 against 1, but he had to make sure that he has 2 sets of pieces. When he played this, Sergei played a great move. Now, this defensive setup, inviting the white pawn to come to d5, eventually it will get to this. Was known from one game also, I think it was Capablanca Alekin. It's just hard, you know. The d-pawn is not remote enough from the black king, so you can stretch his defenses. The famous principle of 2 weaknesses can hardly be applied here. The black king looks both ways, protects g6 and holds the pawn. So 20 more moves of this excitement, and then they finally agreed to a draw. Okay, so here we have it once again, our beautiful cross table. Oh boy, who plays who? What's my favorite chess books? I like kinda conceptual chess books. I remember I loved the 7 Deadly Chess Scenes. Yeah, I loved Modern Chess Strategy Advances since Nimzovich by John Watson, of course. And I love my own book, Road to Chess Improvement. I think that's easily, you know, like, I don't know, top 5 in the best chess books ever written. I'm being too modest today. What I don't like, first of all, I don't like opening books. It's basically a database dump with some shallow advice, platitudes repeated. I haven't seen any good opening books. I never buy them. What I don't like sequels. I don't like, you know, when a chess player writes a book and writes a good book, and then he immediately sits down to write another one. Leave it to professional writers. Leave it to Irving Chernyov and Eric Schiller and John Donaldson and John Watson and Jeremy Silman, the guys who, no, basically write chess books for a living. Okay, maybe, partially. But if you're just a random guy, like the same Jonathan Rawson. So he writes this book, right? The 7 Deadly Chess Sins. It was so fresh. I remember I played tournament, American Continental or Columbia, read this book by poolside, every day. Didn't prepare for any game, won this tournament ahead of 35 grandmasters. And then, I don't know, next year comes out a Chess for Zebras. I couldn't even understand what it was about, who were the zebras? Is the zebra this soccer referee who runs around and blows his whistle when somebody falls? I don't know, I didn't get it, that neither the chess part was not interesting. And I think, that's one of those things. Oh, time's up. Time's up. Listen, guys, I have to do one more thing today. So I bid you farewell now. We had good time. Excel in your positional chess, That grates on me, What is this, How can you... Why is it positional chess? Why do you always expect to improve? Even when they put this, when the publisher put this road to chess improvement, at least, it was kind of personal for my book because it was my own improvement. I never said anywhere in this book, that you read it and you improve. I don't know. Okay, anyway, let's skip that until next time. Guys, importantly, we need to talk about our schedule. We need to talk about scheduling because, look, it's Wednesday, right? So, some guys have probably missed me today, and then some of them come up at 6 o'clock server time tomorrow. Where is Russian Schoolboy live? No, there is no Russian Schoolboy live because we're busy with tournaments. What I did today was the game of the day from round 2, which obviously was Anand Kramnik. Now, I'm gonna do next one. Guess what? Actually, on Thursday next week. That's gonna be a game of the day, round 8. Alright? So, do not skip next week, because now I'm working 2 weeks in a row. It just happened to be Wednesday this week. And Thursday next week. So I'll see you again, 6 p.m. ICC time, when we talk round 8 from Norway Chess. Thank you so much, and have a good one. Oh, I have to wave my hand. Sorry. Was sitting too long on the cross table. Bye!